I shall come before your face, O God, to complain when I have parted from this life. When leaves fall and my soul has sunk to the other side of the world of humankind, before merciful God I shall place my heart, which shriveled and ached while on this earth. I shall say, here are my tears, jade of sorrow, intact, unmelted. There are many wonders in Vietnam, but one of the most astonishing elements of Vietnam's history and culture is that it exists at all. Vietnam has been ruled directly by China for more than half its history and invaded repeatedly, not only by the Chinese, but also by many foreign powers. This has created a present often marked by conflicts between the old and the new, as the Vietnamese create a cultural fusion with which to face the future. When the Vietnamese expanded in the 10th century from their home in the north of today's Vietnam, they encountered the highly developed civilization of the Châm. For us today, the Châm are a faceless people. The Châm were an Indianized people who traded and raided all through Southeast Asia. Although the Vietnamese destroyed the Châm contributed much to contemporary Vietnam. Vietnamese art, music, poetry, literature, and religion owe much to the Châm. But today the Châm are a dwindling minority in what was their own land.
Among the Châm, goddesses and female powers were very important. Their religion was centered around the worship of elemental male and female powers, often personified as Hindu deities like Vishnu, Shiva, Kali, Tara, and many others. Some feel that the high regard of the Châm for female deities has made the Vietnamese today much more open toward the importance of women and female roles in Vietnam. Certainly one reason the Vietnamese have been successful is that they have always drawn on all elements of their population in meeting challenges.
This god of the ancient Châm represents what happened to the Châm themselves. Once a proud and powerful deity, the bull was reduced to what we see here, defaced in a senseless act of brutality by soldiers. And there were so many wars and so many soldiers in this land that there is no point in even asking whether it was an American soldier or a Japanese or a Vietnamese communist or a soldier of the Saigon regime or perhaps a French soldier. But as we can see from the splashes, some soldier turned a machine gun onto this once beautiful sculpture and reduced it, like Châm civilization itself, into this sad lump of stone in the jungle.
The Châm are today one of dozens of minorities in Vietnam, though one of the most numerous. They raised rice in the mountain valleys, storing water for the paddy fields in huge tanks, some of which required millions of man-hours to construct. Châm cities were largely religious centers, and most people probably lived in bamboo huts around them. The Châm left their mark all over Vietnam. Even seemingly inaccessible caves often have Châm altars and religious inscriptions or graffiti.
These Châm temples portray others of the gods of the ancient Châm, like the Garuda bird, symbol of power and majesty, familiar also in Indonesia and Thailand. Sometimes faces of real monarchs were placed in the decorations of the sandstone towers.
Today, there are no more than a few 100,000 Châm. They are a marginalized minority in what had been their rich and fertile lands. The Vietnamese occupiers replaced the Châm gods with their own. A temple to the Châm goddess Po Nagar is now a Vietnamese Buddhist site. She was a naked figure representing female generative and nurturing powers. Today, she is fully clothed and presented as the Vietnamese deity Quang Nam, the goddess of mercy.
Buddhism has long been the dominant religion of the Vietnamese. After the communist victory in 1975, the government initially repressed religion. But with reform, signs of the renaissance of religion are everywhere, and children are once again being allowed to become Buddhist acolytes. As well as being Buddhists, Vietnamese also early adopted Confucianism from neighboring China. More a philosophy than a religion, Confucianism idealized the learned individual scholar. This provided for one of the few cults of individuals other than the monarchs or those worshipped as Buddhist saints. Even Vietnamese women took Confucian scholars, who all were male, as their own model for modernization.
The French arrived in Vietnam as early as the 17th century. They brought Western influences into the Vietnamese spiritual mix, such as the Cao Dai, an eclectic religion joining elements of shamanism, Buddhism, and Confucianism with the worship of such notable personalities as Sun Yat-sen and Victor Hugo. To the Vietnamese, modernity required elevating the individual. Bao Dai was the last Vietnamese king. The tomb of his father, Khai Dinh, blends Vietnamese and French architectural influences. The king was worshipped both as an embodiment of the monarchical principle and as an individual. King Khai Dinh seems enshrined in a sort of Asian Versailles, decorated with an odd combination of traditional and modern symbols. One ancient Vietnamese leader said, "We have often been weak and poor, but we have never lacked for heroes." One of the Vietnamese modern heroes, Ho Chi Minh, shows the tension between the past and the present. Ho, a modern heroic individual in life, has become almost a traditional Buddhist saint. The communist revolutionaries led by Ho Chi Minh relied heavily upon traditional institutions to legitimize their struggle. Ho called himself Uncle Ho, grounding his leadership not in the Communist Party, as Chairman Mao did in China, but in the Vietnamese family. Vietnam today is often seen as a total departure from the past in that it is now dominated by a Communist Party, but it is also true that Vietnam has always had an authoritarian government, whether hereditary kings or communist cadres. In traditional Vietnam, the dead became spirits who either protected or haunted the living. At the Trung Sam National Cemetery, there are buried thousands of those who died along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, by which communist weapons and soldiers entered the South through mountains and jungles. These dead are remembered as heroic warriors and martyrs. There is nothing sadder in Vietnam than to leave one's bones upon the battlefield without anyone to venerate the spirit that has just departed.
Today's notions of death are a combination of the old and the new. But one of the most important events in the lives of Vietnamese people is still the traditional funeral of a parent. Their spirits are sent